Truck drivers, what's a creepy story you've got from the middle of nowhere? I was driving through eastern Washington on some state roads. There were no rest stops or cities, but I had done the route enough to know there were these massive dirt areas every 40 miles where you could park safely away from the road. I decided to call it a night, and closed my blinds and laid down to watch something on my phone. After roughly an hour, I hear someone try to open the driver's side door. I haven't heard any vehicles on the road the whole time I'm parked, but I get up to peek out the curtains. As I'm looking out into the blackness of the driver's side window, I hear them try the passenger side door. I peek down from the top of the curtain but can't see anything, so I start the truck and kick on the lights. I'm fairly freaked out at this point, so I'm still not opening the curtains but peeking through gaps. Nobody is standing near either of my doors or parked within sight line. I take a deep breath and close the sleeper curtains too, because for some reason that's going to make things better, right? After laying back down and convincing myself that something blew against the truck and it only sounded like the doors, it was fairly windy outside and a lot of flat ground, I hear what sounds like someone trying to pry open the vents on the sleeper. The door handles start clicking again, and the truck starts shifting like someone is climbing on it. I hit the little alarm button in the sleeper hoping to spook them off, but it does nothing but add to the noise of door handles, fingers tapping on windows and chassis, and the hiss of air coming out of the suspension. Then suddenly it stops. A few moments where I can only hear myself breathing and my heart pounding before I hear another truck approach and then drive by. I spent the next few hours waiting for whatever it was to come back, but it never did. In the morning I couldn't find any footprints or damage to my truck, but on every window were tiny human-looking handprints, like a toddler had licked their hand and stuck it to my window over and over. Raccoons? Jesus Christ. Thank you for giving me a plausible explanation. This one really freaked me. Driving through an abandoned section of Baltimore at 3 in the morning, my CB radio turned itself on and crackled for a bit. Out of nowhere, some voice over the radio said in a deep southern drawl, "I ain't got no panties on." I could see up and down the interstate for miles and saw not one set of headlights. That was Fred. He just wanted you to know he didn't have no panties on. Honestly though, I have no idea why or when that started, but I've heard it for over 26 years. Leave the CB on, and you will hear it at least once a day. Always a southern drawl, and always said in a harsh whisper. Oh boy, did I go down the Google hole with this one. Apparently there was an older guy in Oklahoma City who went by the handle Bam Bam on CB radio channel 19 and had a recording of the "I ain't got no panties on" that would play every so often on his ridiculously, illegally overpowered CB radio setup. Later he had another creepy recording he'd play. He was infamous amongst truckers and amateur radio operators across the country, because when atmospheric conditions were right, his signal would skip halfway around the country. His name was Klaus Kramer, and he got busted by the FCC at least twice, and was fined $10,000. This was around 2001, and the docs of his FCC trouble are public. Not sure if this story is creepy, but it's definitely scary. My father was a truck driver in East Africa in the 80s and early 90s. During the years leading up to the Rwandan genocide, my father was passing through Rwanda. He reached a checkpoint and was forcibly removed from his truck at gunpoint. Apparently he looked like he belonged to the Tutsi tribe, and they put him in a cage with other Tutsi prisoners. He tried communicating that he isn't Rwandan, but no one spoke the same language as him. Every night they would take about 5 people from the cage and slaughter them in front of him. After the third night, he saw a man that spoke a little bit of Swahili, which my dad spoke, and told him that he's not Rwandan and showed him his ID. Somehow that guy got him out and he was handed the keys to his truck and was on his way. My dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London and tells this story often. He was driving down the motorway and looked to his right, saw a woman with a Miss Trunchbull bun, as he describes it, staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really knows how to react, the car pulls off at the next exit and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About half an hour later, a different car with a different driver pulls alongside my dad, with the same woman in the passenger seat, with the same expression on her face. My dad thinks fuck this and plans to pull into the next services to report, as even if it's nothing or misunderstanding, better to be safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details, plates, etc., and he thinks there is no point calling the police with no details, so he carries on driving. Literally about 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls alongside him with the same woman, same mistrunchable hair, same terrified expression, except this time she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window, so my dad pulls over into a lobby and calls the police. Apparently they have received 3 other calls about the same woman and car in the same area in the last few minutes. Unfortunately, although my father followed the news for the next few days, he was never able to learn anything more. Hopefully it's just a giant coincidence. Who knows? Not a trucker, but I had a college teammate from Miami tell a story that he swears on to this day. He and his girlfriend were making the drive to Naples late night, on a 2-lane road through the Everglades, and had been in a line of cars behind an 18-wheeler for multiple miles. She fell asleep and he was surfing for something to listen to on the radio. Only one station came in clearly enough to be tolerable, so he gave it a listen. The DJ came on and said something along the lines of, "The stars are extra bright in the Everglades tonight. If you're driving through there, pull off and take a look." He said he normally wouldn't even think of it, but for some reason felt compelled to that night. He woke up his girlfriend. She was annoyed and didn't want to, but he convinced her it would be worth it. They stopped and just took in the stars for 5 to 10 minutes. He said it was the most amazing sky he's ever seen. They get back on the road and drive another few minutes and come across a massive accident. The truck they were following had jackknifed and took out a handful of vehicles that were following. He said there were multiple fatalities, but I've never been able to find a news story about it to confirm. Probably would have been in 2005-ish. They most likely would have been involved if not for that random DJ on the only radio station to come in that night. Not technically a truck driver, but I used to work as a field technician in the oil industry, so I spent a lot of time driving through remote areas of Canada at odd hours. One very strange and eerie experience sticks with me. I was in either northeast BC or northwest Alberta, can't remember the exact location, driving late at night, when I noticed a very large black shape on the road in front of me. Thinking it was a moose, I stepped on the brakes, coming to a stop only a few feet from it. Despite being so close, and having my headlights shining directly on it, I still couldn't tell what I was looking at. It was vaguely the shape of a 4-legged animal, but very big, probably about 6 feet tall. Aside from that, it was completely featureless. I couldn't make out any details whatsoever, no shine from its eyes, nothing. And then I noticed there were more of them in the ditch on both sides of the road. 5 or 6, or maybe more, all the same as the black shape on the road in front of me. None of them were moving. They didn't look like physical objects or living things, more like just large patches of absolute darkness. After I got over my shock, dread started to set in, and I drove around the thing on the road and sped off. I don't really believe this was a paranormal experience. I had been driving for 8+ hours through the middle of the night, and I was exhausted. Most likely it was a hallucination caused by lack of sleep and spending too long staring straight ahead into the dark. But it was still a very unsettling experience. Black dog phenomenon. I've also heard of it being a common hallucination for sleep-deprived truckers, and once you see it you know you need to pull over post-fucking-hast because it means you're not far from passing out. I'm not a truck driver, but the story is from a truck driver. I was working the overnight shift from Friday night into Saturday morning at a gas station. At about 6 a.m. a semi pulls into the fuel aisle. Driver gets out and almost runs into the store, clearly shaken. His face is completely white, and he is obviously upset. My first thought was the poor man had hit someone on the road. We get a lot of drunks walking across a 4-lane highway in front of the store. So I ask what's wrong. He looks at me for a second and is like, "I'm not crazy." Now I'm thinking, great, I'm here all alone and this guy is losing it. I say, of course not. I just saw something huge on the side of the road. Like a deer or bear? We had a bear get in the dumpster last week. No bigger than a bear on its back legs. Maybe a big person. It picked up a dead buck on the side of the road and carried it over its shoulder into the woods. I can only stare at him. My brain cannot deal with this information this late in a shift. A local comes up to the counter to get his usual, and the guy tells him the story. The local says, "That's the Bigfoot that lives near the county line." The truck driver and I are both looking at this guy like he has two heads. He has to be joking. This trucker pays for his fuel at record speed and leaves never to be seen again. The local still insists it's Bigfoot. I just don't got in the woods 'cause I don't know. My great uncle drove big trucks. Living in the middle of nowhere, sometimes people would leave trash on the road. And since he had a big truck, he'd just smash into said boxes or paper and continue on. One day he was coming up on a cardboard box and just had the urge to swerve and miss this one. He misses it and passes by with no incident. Looks in his rear view to look at the box, and out pops a kindergarten-aged little kid that just heads back to their house as nothing happened. Years ago I read about a guy who was riding with his truck driver father as a child. They were in the middle of nowhere, and they were coming up on a person laying in the road with no one else around, no cars, etc. His dad blew the horn, they didn't move. He blew it again as he got closer, they didn't move. He told his son to put his head down and cover his eyes, and he ran the person over. When they looked back, a bunch of people who were previously hiding were running out of the woods, and the gist was that his dad knew it was a setup for a robbery or worse, and wasn't chancing it with his child in the car. No clue if it was true or not, but I think about that story all the time. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.